Hello, everybody. Welcome. This is my first time going live on YouTube, so I'm super excited. We're going to be talking pain-free Pilates, keeping your body pain-free today. This is my favorite topic to talk about. There are just so many things you can do to help your body, to help manage pain, to get rid of pain, to prevent injury. And so that is my goal today, to share this information with you so that you know there are solutions and there's so much we can do through movement, and why not start there and see how far you can go? So, just a little bit about me. Like I said, I'm Carrie Van. I am an exercise physiologist. I've been studying this stuff for a while. I'm obviously trained in Pilates. I'm cross trained. I've done classical training, rehabilitative methods, and also have a lot of personal history in dealing with different types of pain and very, very proactive about injury prevention starting very young. So, I pursued this area of trying to figure things out early on through education, through trainings, and then most importantly, through firsthand experience and really working with people to see what works. And I'm just so excited because there's just so much out there that is helpful for you. So let's start off just a little bit with Pilates in general. Now, Pilates is actually really controlology. Yes, I know Pilates sounds a lot better, but it's called controlology, and that means gaining control of your body. The man that invented it, his name was Joseph Pilates. His work was never trademarked, which means that it can exist in many forms and it can be taught in many different ways. And at its roots, it is very rehabilitative. And so, for example, Joseph Pilates was working with wounded soldiers in their hospital beds, trying to bring them back to life. And, to do things like stand, that's an important exercise, or walk. And so we have these fundamental skills that are most important and they're often overlooked. A lot of times they're not even taught. And that is where we want to start. It's like learning a new sport. We've got to start with those skills, get them into our body, build a foundation for our body, and then progress from there. So, in a nutshell, everything that we do, we need to be engaging the deep muscles of our center, transverse abdominal muscle, pelvic floor muscles. Those are the muscles that are going to support, and sustain all of our movement. So, for example, I'm going to grab my favorite piece of equipment here. This is the circle. It's a Pilates ring, Pilates circle, and I love this piece of equipment. It's one of my favorite ways that you can engage the center, and we need to do that with breath. You've got things like focus, concentration in the beginning. So that's what makes it a mind body exercise. We're trying to connect these two entities, the head and the body. They're not separate. And that is how we gain great control of our body. So we have that piece. We got to go deep using our breath. And again, a lot of times the breath is something that's not even really taught. And when we're breathing, the wider our mouth, like a type breath versus a shh, shh, it's going to create more engagement in those deep muscles. For example, if you just take your hands on your lower belly and you work to cough, you will feel those muscles down in there. You'll feel something activating. That's the connection and the power of, let's say, take that and make it an exhalation, a wide exhalation. That's the connection of our breathing to those muscles. So it's hugely important to use the breath. And, not to go off on a tangent, I'll stop talking there, but that when we get our center strong and we go deep and we work on building our foundation, all the things that stabilize our body, that in and of itself is a key component, the key component to pain-free movement, because we need that to sustain our bodies as we move, like I said earlier. So what does that involve? It involves several things. We don't have to get into that so much right now in detail. We could save that for another topic, but in essence, we're getting those muscles strong. That's going to support our movement. That's going to help us, like I said, with standing. It's going to help us with walking. And those are two very important movements, and then everything moving forward. So we're going to break down all parts of our body as well. And I'm going to go through things. For example, let's start with back pain. Okay, let's say I see a lot of people that are, they have back pain. They have general low back pain. And there's just so much you can do by getting that pelvic floor strong, getting those muscles strong, transverse abdominals. That's going to be your first line of defense with back pain. As you get strong, you're going to need other things too. You're going to need to get in movements of your spine. The spine moves in four main directions. We got it flexion, we've got extension, lateral flexion, and we have rotation. So we need to get those movements into our spine regularly. That's going to help us. And most people hurt their backs usually through small movements, something like reaching down, reaching up, or over rotating type movements. And so we've got to keep the movements in our spine, keep the center strong to keep everything active and pliable. Now, in general, we need those movements. It's really important to know if you have an official diagnosis of the spine. For example, if you have stenosis of the spine, then you don't need to be doing extension work. A lot of the things that are done on our stomach, you need to avoid any leg behind type movement. And that is usually important. And it's really important that you tell whoever you're working with and be very careful in any type of group class, because you can really hurt your back and make it a lot worse. Now, that being said, stenosis and another one is spondylolisthesis. You want to avoid extension work with spondylolisthesis as well. There's a lot of crossover there between the two, so you can have the same repercussions. Those two are the biggest that I see a lot, and I see people not, avoiding those movements and then making things worse. The other thing that I see sometimes is herniated disc. Now, if it's acute, yeah, we don't want to be lying on our back, lifting the leg in the air, or any type of, loaded flexion. If we've had physical therapy and over time it's healed, depending on where you are, you may just have to be very mindful of the degree of rotating your spine and so forth as you're progressing. And I would say lastly, and I don't see this a lot, would be osteoporosis type activity. So always checking with your medical provider first and foremost that you don't want to be doing a lot of flexion work or rotating of the spine if they say those movements are not good for the back at that point. So you got to be careful with that. And I myself, I have osteopenia, which is a form of low bone density. And it's fine to be doing everything if you have osteopenia. I see a lot of people with osteopenia. In fact, a lot of us are walking around with osteopenia and don't even know it. And the only way that I actually found out is in doing some research. I was doing research and running bone scans as I was looking at the effects of strength training on older men and postmenopausal women, and was using myself as a guinea pig. And that's how I found out that I had the low bone density. So just being proactive about that. But I don't, in general. So getting back to back pain, in general, we can go a long way with getting our center strong, pelvic floor strong. That's going to help stabilize our movement, then adding in movements of the spine. But there's other things we need to. And typically those include mobility stretches, working on freeing up tension on the things that are pulling on our spine. So primarily that includes our legs, our hips, our shoulders. Guess what? The neck, it is part of the spine. So, mainly, and to what degree can be very individualized, so getting in the habit, and I try to work with people a lot on creating these habits into their lives, because that is going to save your back, and getting to know your body through that and where you're holding tension, because that can have a tremendous impact on back pain as well. And then the last thing when it comes to back pain, a lot of times freeing up the thoracic spine, a lot of times doing that through fascia release. That term, fascia, by the way, the fascia, just on a side note, it's a whole system in and of itself. It covers our entire body. It's like a spider web like substance, and we can form adhesions it covers our muscles, and we can form adhesions that restrict our movement, and they can also cause pain. So we can break down and realign the tissue and then free up our movement. And this is true also for the spine. And let me just show you, I have all my tools lined up here. This is my home studio, my favorite place to be. And right here, this is one of my favorite balls, fascia balls, when it comes to thoracic spine release and also lumbar spine release. I don't advocate just any fascia ball. In fact, I don't share fascia tools unless I know they work. And I only have this one that I like for the spine. And that's just through my years of experience in testing a lot of different types of products. And This woman I know who made the balls, I've worked with her individually at her flagship city in New York. So I trust her products. And this ball is great for thoracic spine release and low back release. So we can free up, in a nutshell, the fascia of the spine, and that can help as well. Okay. So that in and of itself is just a very, kind of comprehensive overview of how do we address back pain. And through these things, we can definitely see improvement. Now, we'll take a moment, and I'm actually going to take a step back, and we're going to talk about the feet, because the feet are just so important. When it comes to our feet, they're connected to every single part of our body. We're standing, so the heel of the foot, and I'm going to show you this real quick. The heel of the foot, this is a foot corrector, by the way, if you've never seen one. This was a piece of equipment that was designed originally by Joseph Pilates. And the whole premise is to get movement in the heel and the ball of the foot and build that connection. And I'm going to talk about that. I don't use it a whole lot as much anymore because I actually have other things that I prefer. But the heel grounds us when we stand, when we walk. Those muscles from the heel go all the way up the back line of our body, the legs to the tailbone and glutes. Then we have the ball of the foot. The ball of the foot relates to the knees, to the pelvic floor. So we want to keep that line strong as well. And when we're walking heel, ball, toe, pushing off the ball of the foot, preferably. Now, if I always try to watch somebody stand and walk, and when I see that they're just popping the foot down, they're not rolling through the whole foot, that's creating a whole chain all the way up through the body that's not to their benefit. And there's usually weakness in the front of the knees as well. So we want to keep the whole foot strong. And what's so important is also, we're going to go back to the piece of fascia, is developing a basic foot fascia routine and mobility routine. You can go such a long way with that. I know myself, I've suffered from chronic issues with my own feet. I used to dance. My feet gave out when I was very young, and at a certain age, I had to even wear a special UCBL, a device for my feet, and only hiking boots. So I've been through a lot of different things with my feet. I've been to the point where I couldn't even go upstairs, and I've had to rebuild strength and retrain my gait in my entire foot. And what I was getting to is, plantar fasciitis. Some of you may have heard of that or had it yourself, and that can be extremely debilitating as well. That plantar fasciitis, that's inflamed fascia of the feet. So by maintaining our own fascia, I'm going to show you this as well here. These are my favorite piece of equipment. These are foot wakers. Again, I use the same fascia line, same woman. I've worked with her directly to retrain my own feet, Yamana Zeki. And so heel, arch, ball of the foot, toe flexion, basics, standing on these or sitting, working on freeing up our fascia, and then also working on the Achilles and the calf muscles, as well as the front ankle, freeing up tension there as well. We need all of that. And this, in addition, I love, some of you know this, I've said this before, the Pro Stretch is great because that is a rocking device that can also free up the Achilles. So we want to keep our feet, our fascia fit, right? This is a very simple routine. You get this into your life. It's going to help you. We want to keep mobility in our ankles. We also need to keep our ankles strong. And I typically basically use TheraBands to do that, and checking in with that, even if it's once, at most even twice a week, if you have weak ankles, can go a long way in preventing injury and keeping not only the feet strong, but also the ankles, because they're all connected. So the feet are essential. We've got to stand, we've got to walk. So they're hugely important. Okay. All right. So we've got back pain. We've talked about the feet. Let's talk a little bit now about the knees. And what I think is important, I'm going to step back here for a minute, is that we're going to talk about strengthening. Anytime I'm doing strengthening work, everything is Pilates based. I call it whole body, center-based strength. So I'm using my whole body. Primarily, I'm getting all my strength from here because it's active and strong. that's not always the case when we're doing strength work. I know it wasn't for me, and I've taught this stuff. I've studied strength work. I've even taught weightlifting at one point. And it wasn't until I reconnected with those muscles through my Pilates work a long time back that I was able to reconnect to the power of using the whole body when we're getting strong. And even when we are strengthening the muscles around our knees, typically I'll use ankle weights, bands, or what have you. We are using our whole body. We are actually even using our breath in our center. And that is powerful. So when it comes to preventing knee pain, we've got to keep the muscles around the knee strong, the quadriceps, the hamstrings, the calves, inner outer thighs, all those muscles need to stay strong. In addition to keeping them strong, we've got to keep the muscles flexible as well. That is just as important. It's just not about the strength, it's the balance between the two. And I've had many people come to me that have knee pain, and it's primarily because they have tightness around the knees. Okay. And I've experienced that myself as well. I have had very strong legs. This is a long time ago. I was having severe knee pain. And it was because I needed to work on mobility and flexibility around the knee joint. That's simple. So we want to make sure we're integrating stretching primarily, checking in with our legs and keeping them limber. It's hugely important. And then, yes, we definitely can use fascia as well in almost everything, but that I would say is important. And then I've got to tell you this, one of the most important things you can do right now is if you are doing any type of kneeling or getting up and down from the floor or whatever it might be, you need to support your knee joint. And here, I love the AirX pad. You can get something similar. This cushions your knee joint. This provides support for the knee because, kneeling can wreak havoc on the knees. And I'm talking about not so much maybe when you're young, unless you're doing a lot of work on the knees. Look at a carpenter. They wear knee pads for a reason, right? But after age 40, our body changes tremendously. And we begin to add up. Repetitive movements on our knees add up. I mean, I even experienced knee pain and started doing this a long time ago because of that. So just being proactive, why not cushioning the knee joint? It's usually important. We don't even talk about it. I don't kneel without a pad. And I just wanted to share that with you today if you are still doing that movement. Okay, so the other thing that's really important when it comes to the knees, and we're going to go right up the body into the hips, is keeping the hips strong. We've got to keep them strong. That supports our knees directly. So many things to do that are Pilates based. A lot of sideline work is just awesome. And getting range of movement in the hip joints is really helpful as well. So keeping range of motion and keeping strength in the hips is just really important for the knees, as well as keeping our hips strong. And the glutes, of course, our butt muscle is important. And learning to connect from the heels to the glutes through certain exercises is also extremely important for getting rid of things like hip bursitis and so forth. We can use fascia release. Again, let me show you this. I know I get excited about this, but these are my favorite balls to use for freeing up the hip joint, the piriformis, that internal hip rotator. Is just lovely. And like I said, after age 40, a lot of times we'll see a lot of changes, especially if you're a woman. I know myself, like I could do a seated butterfly position. My head could just touch my feet. Not after age 40. All of a sudden I went to do that and there was restriction. So I had to be very proactive about doing my fascia work for my hips. And then the other thing that's important in addition to the fascia work and as well as the strengthening of the hips is making sure that you're getting in mobility through the hip joint, and flexibility is key. So I call all my stretching or flexibility exercise mobility stretches because they improve mobility. That's the term that I developed that I love. And we need to work on the piriformis muscle. That's important. We need to get the psoas muscle open. We need to get the TFL, the adductors, all the leg muscles, everything that's going to be the IT band. All those things need to stay free up in our bodies. And as we get into, not to go off on a tangent on stretching, but as we get into that habit, which really that's what we're shooting for, that we're checking in throughout our week, we can connect to our body. We can save ourselves so much pain and prevent so much injury by doing that simple task of stretching. So it's a combination of things, yes, but I just have to share with you how important that stretching piece is, because most of us are not stretching. We're not stretching enough if we are, and we're not holding our stretches to the point where we actually feel or sense improvement. And that's a learned skill. So just, on a side note, getting into the habit of stretching um, is essential. Okay. All right. So I know I'm talking a lot and talking quickly, but this information I just really want to get out to you today is that, we've talked about back pain, we've talked about the feet, the knees, the hip. I do want to touch base just a little bit as well on the shoulders. And again, I also use these balls for the hips. You can use all these things in many different ways, but I use these to release fascia restrictions in my shoulders. Lovely, because if we check in there, it's amazing. You can really sense how much tension is being held in the shoulders. Again, letting go with your breath. It's just a great tool in and of itself. Keeping the muscles around the shoulder open, stretching. And then when it comes to strengthening work for the shoulders, similar to the ankles, I tend to use the TheraBands a lot. And I'm really focusing in on strengthening the rotator cuffs and the serratus anterior, I like to call the armpit muscles in the front, because that's what's going to keep our shoulder blades secure and stable. And if you are, for example, like myself, I'm a swimmer, I like to swim. It's hugely important because that movement we can overuse. And if our shoulders are not strong and stable, then that can lead to injury. And, the same if you play tennis or golf, that repetitive movement. But in general, we need to keep those muscles strong anyway. So that's going to help to set us up to avoid injury. Okay. So there's just, we've talked about, everything so far, almost everything. And there's just so many things that we can do, natural, movement based. We're incorporating our therapeutic Pilates, our fascia release, our whole body strength work, our mobility stretching. All these things are just extremely important for maintaining our body. And there's just so much you can do to help your own body. I see this all the time. And this is what is so important to share, is that I can see somebody who just totally avoid a back surgery by getting these things into their body. And it's just awesome to see somebody that is living. This is not just an exercise program, living this lifestyle where they've made these things a habit into their week. And that's what's awesome. And it is totally doable. And that's why I'm here to share with you today that there is a solution. I do want to just touch base quickly a little bit on the hand and wrist health too. So when it comes to that, one of my favorite pieces of equipment I love to share about this is a hand web. And here you can see it's two different resistances. You can put your hand on one side, you can pull in and push out just to work on hand and wrist strength. And you can even isolate the finger movement in the resistance. So the hand web is great. The other thing that I like here is, this is a hand master. It's a ball and it has extension resistance on the fingers. And I'm sharing this with you because you can squeeze, build that strength, but you can extend too. So this is a great tool. It's something that you can even keep in your purse. You can, or whatever you're carrying, you can walk around Target if you're there, whatever it is, you can have the ball in your hand and be working and maintaining the health of your hand and wrist. And so, I like to keep this just out so that I see it, because I know, a lot of times, a lot of people are struggling because we're doing a lot of device work and all that stuff. And so it's just important to think about keeping our hands and fingers strong, but also flexible. So getting in the stretches that we need to maintain a flexible wrist. We don't want to develop carpal tunnel and, just making sure you're set up, obviously, positionally, but all of those things I've done. I've definitely focused in on my own hand health, and I use bands as well. TheraBands are great. Again, very simple. Loop here, you can hold it down, pull up, pull under. You can anchor it down. You could use a hand weight. The other thing is the simple task of, I have a hand weight on this pole, of this movement pulling in, and pulling up. So in a nutshell, we just want to be able to keep our hands strong. They're just as important as our feet. And anybody that has ever suffered a wrist injury, I have a client right now that's going through that, and myself last year at this time, I had a severe tendinosis, which is another story. And so I know, when you're not able to use your hands and wrists fully, you begin to really appreciate them, just like the feet. Okay, so all of our body is important. And so bringing the awareness to everything, I think, is key. Now, I know I've been talking a lot, and I know this isn't a Q&A, so I'm just going to keep going. I just want to say just a few more things. You can do a lot of things in the water as well. I do a whole, Pilates based work in the water. That's a whole nother talk. I don't have all my water stuff here today, but just real quickly, the benefit of taking your Pilates work to the water is just amazing, because you're challenging your body in a standing position supported by the water. So you're going to improve things like balance, and we're going to get a lot of different things into our body that we need, stabilization and strength. So yes, just in a nutshell, the water is a wonderful tool. And although it's not for everybody, generally it's great if you are already doing water aerobics or you are a swimmer. So there's many things we can do in the water. Just on a side note as well, I want to say just a couple more things, and I know then we'll wrap it up. But one thing that's really important, and I have a whole guide on this as well, is just basic things for preventing back pain. Some of the things we touched on today is when we are sitting, having some type of support. Whether it's a ball, a bigger ball or a smaller ball. If we're in the car, behind our back, our lumbar spine, or even higher up, so that we have ears over shoulders over hips, can go a long way. Our spine likes to have that alignment, and we begin to crave that when we know what good posture feels like. There's nothing wrong with having the support. I use support. I do this stuff for a living. It's not possible to maintain a posture. I don't care who you are, 100% of the time. If somebody says they do, they're lying. Okay, so it's really important to give your back the support it needs, especially if you are having any type of current issues with back pain. So, okay, just getting back to it. I hope that you have found this information helpful. I wanted to get on here today. Some of you, this is all new information. Some of you may have heard some of this before if you've listened to me in the past, but just know that if you are struggling with any type of pain, like we described, or you have stiffness, or you're just not feeling good in your body, that there are so many things you can do to help it. And let's just say that it's really important to know that it is individualized. Everybody's coming from a different place. We're carrying different movement histories with us, and so all kinds of things. And long story short, you can use many things on a thick mat on the ground, but you don't have to. Look, this is my bed here. I have a board. I've created my home studio on a bed. I don't have to even get down to the floor. I can, but I choose not to. I have it set up here. I have a lot of people that work with tables in their homes, and so if you want to do you're stretching and you can't get down to the floor, get a portable massage table. There's just a lot of things that you can do, and nowadays it's just endless. This past December, I even did a training on. I have now actually all new things of taking Pilates, like the larger equipment, which is really not necessary anymore. You can take that into your home too and do the work that you would on a reformer or Cadillac. So it's just so exciting and empowering, but we've got to start somewhere. And again, taking it back, we've got to start with their foundation, because as we're gaining control of our body, we can do a lot of things on a mat, or if you can't get on your back, in a chair. I didn't mention that, but there's a lot of things you can even do in a chair. But in general, progressing wherever you are and progressing and developing more skills, your body will appreciate that. And it's just endless. So you definitely, like I said, I didn't say this, but not every position is good for everybody. On a side note, so typically we're looking at kneeling on our stomach, on our sides, on our back, seated with our legs out in front of us. And so knowing what positions that you may need to avoid is also helpful, because you can't just assume that, that every position is going to be good for everybody. So, okay, I know I've talked a lot today, but just to recap, keeping your body pain-free is, yes, 100% possible. I live this stuff. I teach, I preach this stuff. I see it happening every day with the clients that I work with. It is 100% possible. So there are solutions. If you have any specific questions for me, go head over to movementcraft.com and contact me. I would be happy to get back to you. So I would say for today, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. I'm going to end the live, but I thank you so much for coming. Okay, take care.